Yo, what's going on everybody? My name is Braxophone, and today I'm bringing you another Genshin Impact guide. This time we'll be taking a deep dive into a lot of people's favorite character, Diluc. Diluc is one of those characters that's been on the top of tier lists for a while now, but a lot of people still don't know how to play him, so that's what I'm here to help you guys with today. In this guide, we're going to be looking at what Diluc's abilities do, melee optimization, what constellations are worth the extra 5-star pulls, and finally, weapons and artifacts to look for when you're building Diluc. Let's get started with some basic information about Diluc, and then we can get right into abilities and melee optimization. Diluc is the tallest available character model and male, so he climbs higher and runs faster than the other characters in the game. Diluc is a fire aspected character who uses a very slow but hard-hitting two-handed sword. He can be the DPS of your dreams if you haven't gotten catching yet. He hits extremely hard and consistently, and it's all due to his abilities. Diluc, like all current other playable characters in the game, has 3 abilities. The main one is his basic attack, the second one is his elemental skill, and the third one is his elemental burst. Diluc's very first talent/ability is Tempered Sword, which performs up to 4 consecutive strikes with his claymore. By holding down the normal attack button, you can get him into his charged attack combo, which is basically just a volley of slashes, where at the end, he performs one big powerful slash that sweeps a wide area. I'm gonna say this now before we get into DPS numbers, but this one definitely is not worth using unless you're trying to hit multiple enemies at once in a consecutive volley to prevent them from damaging you. It's not gonna touch anywhere near the highest DPS numbers we're gonna pull today. And like all other characters, he has a plunging attack. The damage of all of these attacks depends on the level of the Tempered Sword skill. At level 1, the stats are as follows. 1 hit damage is 89.7%, 2 hit damage is 87.6%, 3 hit damage is 98.8%, 4 hit damage is 134%. His charged attack spinning damage, which is basically holding down his charged attack, is 68.8%, so very low. His charged attack final damage is 125%, which is the final swing he takes that's very wide. The charged attack stamina cost is 40 per second. The max duration this can last is 5 seconds. The plunge damage is 89.5%. And the low/high plunge damage, depending on the height, is 179% to 224%. When you level up Tempered Sword, all of these stats increase except for the max duration and stamina cost. The stamina cost is going to remain the same along with the max duration, so you'll never have higher than 5 seconds charge. In my most recent video, I went over the best DPS combos for Jean, and I'm going to do the same thing here. However, it's a little bit more complicated for Diluc. Diluc has really high damage, and that's because of his ability Searing Onslaught, which is activatable at any time during his combo and can be woven between combos. Here's what I mean. I successfully tested 4 different combos that output different amounts of damage on Diluc. The first combo I went over is his standard 1-2-3-4 hit combo, which is a result of his Tempered Sword. I performed 2 of these combos in a row without animation canceling anything, and it took about 7.2 seconds. Since I replaced all crits with normal hits in my calculations, this one ended up being 353.9 DPS. Another combo I tested is 1-2-1-2-repeat. This combo took about 4.97 seconds to execute, and it ended up being 332.6 DPS. When I tested 1-2-3 animation cancel by dash, it didn't really seem like a very promising number, so I just left it out of the equation. I can already tell you that the next section is going to leave you much more damage. Before we get into weaving, let's talk about Diluc's second ability, Searing Onslaught. Searing Onslaught is a 3-part combo. Each one is activated by the elemental skill button at any given time. It can be used 3 times consecutively, but it can also be woven into normal attacks. If the first swing is cast and the second one is not cast within a short window, the cooldown will reset and you won't be able to complete the combo. This window is about 4 seconds between each hit. Onto the specs of the ability, the first hit damage is 94.4%, 2 hit damage is 97.6%, and the 3 hit damage is 129%. The cooldown for the ability is 10 seconds, but it begins as soon as the first ability is cast. The damage for Searing Onslaught is pyro damage, which means that it won't count your physical damage stat at all. Upon level up, the first, second, and third hit damage all increase, but the cooldown remains the same, and the cooldown between each swing remains the same as well. Alright, so putting it into practice now, we're going to look at some elevated damage numbers. Here I recorded some combinations, but weaving Searing Onslaught between the attacks. The first combo I tested was 1-2 Searing Onslaught, and repeating the 1-2 Searing Onslaught until the end of the combo, because as stated before, there is a window of 4 seconds between each swing of Searing Onslaught. The combo was performed 3 times to get all 3 swings of Searing Onslaught out, and then to make sure that the combo could be chained again, we had to wait for the cooldown to be over, so we just filled it with a regular 1-2-3-4 combo. By the end of the combo, Searing Onslaught was up again, and we could start the combo over again. Our full combo of these abilities took us about 10.2 seconds and left us with a DPS of 556.6, which is already higher than our DPS without Searing Onslaught woven in between. The fourth combination I did was 1-2-3 Searing Onslaught, so I was actually weaving Searing Onslaught between 3 and 4 to animation cancel that really slow 4th hit. I recorded 3 of that combo to make sure I got every single hit of Searing Onslaught, and it was super hard to get the golem to not smack me in the middle of it because it's a very long combo. It lasted about 8.5 seconds, but we did manage to pull off 626.5 DPS, which is our highest so far. By the time this combo ended, Searing Onslaught was ready to go again because you can go ahead and hit another 1-2-3, and then by that time, the full 10 seconds is up. The last combo I did is completely calculated and not actually applicable to this fight that I was having, but I couldn't fight another NPC because that would lead me to different damage numbers, and I want to make sure to have the most accurate information for you guys. So I recorded the total damage of the combo with some interruptions, and then I performed the combo outside of the fight with precision accuracy to get the time frame that it would take to execute. This combination ended up taking about 9.6 seconds and left us with a massive number of 684.7 DPS. So ultimately, looking at our numbers, the more difficult the combo is to accurately pull off without getting interrupted, the more damage it does. What's nice about the highest damage combo, the 1-2-3-4 Searing Onslaught, is that you get Searing Onslaught back off of cooldown by the time you get to the next Searing Onslaught marker. So you can infinitely chain that combo with no interruptions as long as you're not getting punched by anything. It also optimizes your pyro damage as the burnout effect begins to end right after you cast your next Searing Onslaught, which means theoretically, if you don't get interrupted, the fire will never go away on characters affected by fire and on grass and plants. In conclusion, the best combination is going to be 1-2-3-4 Searing Onslaught if you can pull it off. If not, try 1-2-3 Onslaught, and then if not that, you can do 1-2 Onslaught as well, or ultimately you can just weave Searing Onslaught between attacks to make sure you're animation canceling and maximizing your damage output. Now that we've optimized our melee DPS, we can keep looking at Diluc's abilities. Diluc's Elemental Burst is absolutely busted and a super fun ability to use. The ability is called Dawn, and it summons a giant phoenix from Diluc's blade as he swings it. The phoenix flies forward, does wide area pyro damage, and knocks back enemies. After Diluc's cast, his sword becomes enchanted with fire, and he starts doing pure pyro damage. The enchantment duration on this ability is 8 seconds post-cast. The stats are as follows. The slashing damage is 204%, the damage over time is 60%, the explosion damage is 204%, the cooldown is 12 seconds, and the energy cost is 40. The low energy cost and cooldown allows Diluc to spam this ability a lot in combat, and you will see it a lot in dungeons. Upon level up, the slashing damage, damage over time, and explosion damage will all get an increase. The cooldown, enchantment duration, and energy cost all do remain the same. Next is going to be passives and constellations, so we're going to go through these next 3 passives, and then we'll talk about which constellations are best. Diluc's first passive is Relentless. It makes it so his charged attack stamina is decreased by 50% and the duration is increased by 3 seconds. This ability is fairly straightforward, and you unlock it after ascending Diluc. Diluc's next passive ability is Blessing of Phoenix. This passive makes it so after the cast of Dawn, Diluc's Elemental Burst, the pyro enchantment on his sword lasts 4 seconds longer, and he gains 20% pyro damage bonus during the duration of the enchantment. It's basically just a big pyro damage buff. Diluc's final passive is a non-combat passive that refunds 15% of ores used when crafting Claymore type weapons. Spam this to refine your Claymore. And moving on to constellations, the first constellation is called Conviction. Conviction makes it so that if an opponent is above 50% health, Diluc deals 15% more damage to that enemy. This ability seems pretty decent, but for pulling Diluc another time, I don't know if it's necessarily worth it, but let's go ahead and move on to the next one and compare them. Searing Ember is the second constellation, and it makes it so that when Diluc takes damage, his base attack increases by 10% and his attack speed increases by 5%. This effect lasts for 10 seconds and can stack up to 3 times. A max total of 15% bonus attack speed and 30% bonus damage is pretty decent. This is one of Diluc's stronger constellations. Fire and Steel is Constellation 3, and it increases the level of Searing Onslaught by 3, stating that the maximum upgrade level is 15. I think this ability is pretty busted, but again, I don't know if it's worth pulling 3 Dilucs for, but blanket buffs to abilities you use all the time are always good. Constellation 4 is Flowing Flame. Casting Searing Onslaught in sequence greatly increases damage dealt. Within 2 seconds of using Searing Onslaught, casting the next Searing Onslaught in the combo deals 40% additional damage. This effect lasts for the next 2 seconds. This constellation seems busted in a different way. This is interesting because once you have Constellation level 4, your best DPS combo is going to change. This constellation in particular makes Diluc a very malleable character because this constellation combined with Searing Ember allows you to use the 1-2-3 Onslaught and 1-2 Onslaught combo for maximum DPS over the 1-2-3-4 Onslaught combo. And that's going to completely depend on if your attack speed is buffed by the Searing Ember constellation. This means that the gameplay loop is interchangeable for Diluc and his combat isn't just button mashing anymore. Now you actually need to think about your combat if you want to maximize DPS output. I challenge you to test your DPS when you get to Constellation level 4 and see how much improved it is. The next constellation on the list is Constellation 5, which is called Phoenix Harbinger of Dawn. It increases the level of Dawn by 3, which ultimately just ups your damage. Again, it's another blanket buff. I don't know if it's necessarily worth hitting level 5 for because, that is a lot of money or a long time playing, but a buff's a buff. Constellation level 6 is busted and fun and changes Diluc's gameplay loop. It's titled Flaming Sword, Nemesis of Dark, and it makes it so after casting Searing Onslaught, the next 2 normal attacks within the next 6 seconds will have their damage and attack speed increased by 30%. Additionally, Searing Onslaught will not interrupt the normal attack combo. This completely changes your rotation. Apologies as I'm not able to show you a gameplay example of this, but I can tell you exactly what you're going to need to do. If you are Constellation level 6 and you have not taken any damage, you are going to do the following. 1, 2, Searing Onslaught, 3, 4, Searing Onslaught, 1, 2, Searing Onslaught, 3, 4, 1, 2, Searing Onslaught. The reason for doing Searing Onslaught after 3 and 4 is to cancel the dead animation at the end of the 4th swing. Your ability to do this consistently and effectively is going to depend on how much damage you take. With a 45% attack speed buff, you might even have some downtime between the next Searing Onslaughts. Ultimately, as far as constellations go, I think that 2, 4, and 6 are really strong. The others are just blanket buffs, and that's awesome, but ultimately I'd like to see more crazy stuff like this that changes your actual attack pattern as you get to a higher constellation level. Now that we've covered constellations, we can go ahead and move on to artifact setups, because there's a couple ways you can do this. Diluc plays a little bit differently from a lot of characters. He actively weaves his element into his standard rotation, which means ideally you should be speccing for elemental mastery and attack at the same time. Unlike in most RPGs where you want to maximize your best stat and minimize your worst stat, you want to find a happy balance with Diluc. To preface this section though, Diluc is 100% a hard DPS. If you try to make Diluc a healer, you're gonna have a bad time. One of the nice things about Diluc is that his crit rate actually starts fairly high. This means that if you want to, you can build him on crit rate and crit damage. A good set for this would be the Berserker set, but you do have to be careful going into 4-piece sets because you do want to have a little bit of pyro damage or elemental mastery as well. Based on constellations alone, it looks like Diluc wants to take a little bit of damage to get his maximum value. So if he did want to run 4 Berserker, he would put out a ton of crit. If you do try to create a crit build with Diluc, you want to make sure that you're using a 40% crit rate bare minimum. 50% is even better if you can manage. This can be accomplished by using the set bonus from Berserker and then just applying a couple crit rate high level artifacts. Also keep in mind you do have substats, so if you want to add some elemental mastery, you can do that as well. The current set that I am trying to acquire for Diluc right now is the Crimson Witch of Flame set, where I want to have 2 pieces of that so that way you get the pyro damage buff, but you also get the gladiator attack buff. In that set, I'm building pure damage with the exception of one of my artifacts, which is building pyro damage. This is probably the best set available right now, but if you want to try to build crit, you totally can, especially if you get to Constellation 6 and you're attacking much faster. Your ideal substats will be different based on the set that you're building. If you're trying to build crit, you want attack percent, crit rate, and crit damage. If you build 2 Gladiator and 2 Crimson Witch, you want attack percent, elemental recharge, and elemental mastery. If you can't get all 4, that's fine and totally common, but you should try to get as many of those as you can on the ideal artifact for your Diluc build. The last thing we're going to go over is where Diluc fits in a party composition. Diluc's main and only role is basically to hack and slash at everything in the way. He staggers enemies, he does a ton of pyro damage, and he does a ton of physical damage. When you're building a party composition around him, you kind of have 2 directions you can go, and I would be careful to only build these 2 directions. The first path you can take is building electric resonance, so having 2 electric characters and Diluc in the same party. This allows you to combo more electrocharged, overloaded, and superconduct combos, and the overloaded one applies to fire specifically, so if you're running Diluc a lot of the time, you're going to hit a lot of those. The electro particles dropping is another pretty decent bonus. The second path you can take, and this is my preferred path, is to double up on fire. When you run double pyro, you get a 25% attack buff on every character in the party. Now, if you've been building Diluc correctly, 25% on top of what you already had should be insane numbers. One thing you'll want to make sure of when you create a party with Diluc is that you have some kind of combo for fire and you have some sort of healer, because it's Diluc's favorite thing to get up close and personal with enemies, which means he will be taking a ton of damage. There's a ton of different ways to run Diluc, but the main thing is you want to make sure that he is a big DPS, because his stats and kit are just perfect for it. If you don't have a good weapon for Diluc, or if you're wondering what's best, the Wolf's Gravestone 5-star is going to be the best option you have for Diluc if you are able to obtain it, as it gives a flat attack percent bonus, and its effect gives you bonus attack by hitting things. If you can't make the 5-star cut, go with the Prototype Ammonus. It is a claymore with attack bonus as well in the purple or 4-star tier, and it gives you a nice bonus damage AoE every couple swings. And if you're unable to craft that 4-star sword, even with Diluc's refund bonus, go ahead and use the Skyrider Greatsword. You can find these around the map outside of the gacha if you're unable to get one. Its ability Courage is awesome, stacking up attack percent with a max of 4 stacks. That is sick, and it's just like Rancor on Jean. And with that, you know everything you need to know involving how to run Diluc optimally. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, and if you're feeling generous, make sure to drop a sub and help me get to 100 subscribers so I can get a custom URL for my channel, and so I can keep tons of people in the loop on Genshin content. I hope you all learned something today, and thanks a ton for watching. Catch you next time.